In the dense woods of rural Montana, where morning mist clings to ancient oak trees like ghostly fingers, a young woman named Sarah Martinez learned that survival isn't just about escaping danger. It's about discovering the fierce courage that lives inside you when everything familiar disappears. What started as a simple hiking trip with college friends became a nightmare that would test every instinct she never knew she possessed. This is the true story of how one woman's weekend getaway turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse, where the hunters became the hunted, and where the space between two oak trees became both a prison and a pathway to freedom. Some stories of survival are born from natural disasters or accidents. This one was born from human cruelty and the unbreakable will to live. Sarah Martinez had always believed that bad things happened to other people. At 22, she moved through life with the confidence of someone who had never truly faced danger. Her biggest worries were college exams and whether Jake, her boyfriend of 8 months, would remember their anniversary. She lived in a world of coffee shops, lecture halls, and weekend plans that never involved anything more dangerous than deciding between pizza or Chinese takeout. The invitation came from her roommate, Emma, on a Thursday evening in late September. Emma burst into their shared apartment with the enthusiasm she brought to everything. Her cheeks flushed from the autumn cold and her eyes bright with excitement. "Sarah, you have to come with us this weekend. Tyler found this amazing camping spot up in the mountains. It's completely off the grid, no cell service, no tourists, just pure nature. We're talking about a real adventure here." Sarah looked up from her psychology textbook, already shaking her head. "You know I'm not really the camping type, Em. I like my showers hot and my bed soft. Plus, I have that paper due Monday." Emma flopped down on the couch next to her, undeterred. "Come on, when was the last time you did something spontaneous? Something that didn't involve studying or Netflix?" Tyler's bringing his friend Marcus, and Jake's already said yes. "It'll be fun, I promise. Just 2 nights under the stars." The mention of Jake changed everything. Sarah had been feeling distant from him lately, like they were drifting in different directions. Maybe a weekend away from distractions would help them reconnect. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding. "Okay, but I'm bringing bug spray and my portable phone charger, even if there's no service."
Emma squealed and threw her arms around Sarah. "This is going to be the best weekend ever."
"You'll see." Friday afternoon arrived with perfect autumn weather. The leaves were just beginning to turn, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Tyler pulled up in his Jeep, music blasting, with Marcus in the passenger seat. Both guys were the outdoorsy type that Sarah usually avoided. All flannel shirts and confident grins that suggested they knew secrets about the wilderness that she didn't. Jake slid into the back seat next to Sarah, giving her a quick kiss. "Ready for your first real camping experience?" he asked, his hand finding hers. "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah replied, trying to match his enthusiasm. The drive took them deep into the Montana wilderness, far from the main highways and tourist destinations. Tyler navigated increasingly narrow dirt roads with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. The cell service had disappeared an hour ago, leaving them truly disconnected from the outside world. "How do you even know about this place?" Sarah asked, watching dense forest rush past her window. "My family's been coming up here for years," Tyler replied, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "My dad taught me all the best spots. This one's special, though. Completely isolated. We won't see another soul all weekend." Something in his tone made Sarah shift uncomfortably, but she pushed the feeling aside. She was probably just nervous about being so far from civilization. They reached their destination as the sun was beginning to set. The campsite was a small clearing surrounded by towering oak trees, their branches creating a natural canopy overhead. A creek ran nearby, its gentle babbling the only sound besides the wind in the leaves. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed, and Sarah had to admit she was right. There was something magical about the place, something that made the modern world feel very far away. They set up camp as darkness fell, working by flashlight and lantern. Marcus and Tyler handled the heavy lifting while Jake struggled with the tent stakes, cursing under his breath when they bent instead of going into the hard ground. Sarah and Emma gathered firewood, staying close to camp as the forest grew darker and more mysterious around them. The first night passed peacefully. They roasted marshmallows, told ghost stories, and laughed at Jake's terrible jokes. Sarah began to relax, thinking maybe Emma had been right about this being exactly what she needed. The stars were brighter than she had ever seen them, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. She slept better than expected, lulled by the sounds of the forest and Jake's steady breathing beside her. When she woke Saturday morning to the smell of coffee brewing over the campfire, she felt more rested than she had in weeks. "See? I told you this would be good for you," Emma said, handing her a steaming cup. Sarah smiled and nodded, taking in the peaceful morning scene. Marcus was already dressed in hunting gear, cleaning what looked like a high-powered rifle. The sight of the weapon made her stomach clench with unexpected anxiety. "You going hunting?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Just some target practice," Marcus replied, not looking up from his gun. "Tyler and I like to keep our skills sharp." "What kind of targets?" Jake asked, and Sarah was relieved that she wasn't the only one who seemed uncomfortable. Tyler emerged from his tent carrying his own rifle. "We set up some cans downrange. Don't worry, we know what we're doing. Been hunting since we were kids." The morning hunting session lasted several hours. Sarah and Emma stayed at camp, reading and talking while the sounds of occasional gunfire echoed through the forest. Jake had gone with the other men, though Sarah could tell he was just trying to fit in. When they returned for lunch, something had changed. Sarah couldn't put her finger on what exactly was different, but there was a new tension in the air. Marcus and Tyler seemed more aggressive somehow, their jokes edged with cruelty. They kept making comments about hunting and tracking, about the thrill of the chase. "There's nothing like the look in a deer's eyes when it realizes it's trapped," Marcus said, his gaze lingering on Sarah in a way that made her skin crawl, that moment when it knows there's nowhere to run. Tyler laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. The best hunters know how to read fear. They can smell it from miles away. Sarah excused herself to use the bathroom, walking deeper into the woods than she normally would, just to get away from their disturbing conversation. As she was walking back to camp, she heard voices, Marcus and Tyler talking in low, urgent tones. "She's perfect for it," Marcus was saying. "Look at her. City girl, scared of her own shadow. She'll run exactly how we want her to. And if she doesn't?" Tyler's voice was cold. "Then we make her run." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against a large oak tree, hardly daring to breathe as the full implications of what she had heard sank in. They weren't talking about hunting animals. They were talking about hunting her. Her mind raced trying to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. These were Tyler's friends, people Emma trusted, but the predatory gleam in their eyes, the way they had been watching her all day, suddenly made terrible sense. She had to get back to camp and warn the others. They could pack up immediately, claim a family emergency, anything to get away from this place. But as she started to move, a hand closed over her mouth and another grabbed her arm. "Going somewhere?" Marcus whispered in her ear. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized her mistake. She had been so focused on getting back to warn the others that she hadn't been careful about noise. They had heard her approach and been waiting. Now, Tyler said, stepping out from behind another tree. "We can't have you spoiling our fun before it even begins." They dragged her deeper into the woods, away from the camp where Emma and Jake were probably wondering where everyone had gone. Sarah tried to scream, but Marcus's hand was clamped firmly over her mouth. She bit down hard, tasting blood, and he jerked his hand away with a curse. "Help!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "Jake! Emma! Help me!" Marcus backhanded her across the face, the blow stunning her into silence. "Do that again and things will get much worse for your friends back there," he snarled. "This is between us and you. Keep it that way and maybe they live through the weekend." The threat to her friends was more effective than any physical force. Sarah stopped struggling, her mind racing as she tried to figure out what to do. They were miles from civilization, no cell service, and now she was separated from the only other people who might help her. Tyler pulled out a length of rope. "Here's how this is going to work. We're going to give you a head start. You run, we hunt. Make it interesting for us and you might even survive." "This is insane," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" "Because we can," Marcus replied simply. "Because you're here, and we're here, and nobody will ever know what happened in these woods." They tied her hands behind her back, but loosely enough that she might be able to work free with time and effort. Sarah realized this was intentional. They wanted her to escape the bonds, wanted her to run. It was all part of their sick game. "We'll give you until sunset," Tyler said, checking his watch. "That's about 4 hours. Use them wisely." They walked her deeper into the forest, past the creek, past any landmark she might recognize. Finally, they stopped in a small clearing flanked by 2 massive oak trees, their trunks so wide that they formed natural barriers on either side. "Perfect," Marcus said, surveying the area. "Natural boundaries. She can only run in two directions. They tied a second rope around her waist, securing her between the two oak trees. The rope was long enough to allow movement but not escape. Sarah was trapped in a natural corridor, with oak trees forming walls and only two ways to run when they finally released her. "Now we wait for sunset," Tyler said, settling down with his rifle across his knees. And then the real fun begins. Sarah sank to the ground, her mind reeling. She was being used as a live target, positioned between the oaks like prey in a shooting gallery. But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to grow inside her. Not just fear, but anger. These men thought they could terrorize her, use her for their entertainment, maybe even kill her. They had made one crucial mistake, though. They thought she was just a helpless city girl who would panic and make it easy for them. They didn't know that Sarah had grown up with 3 older brothers who had taught her to fight dirty when cornered. They didn't know about the self-defense classes she had taken after a friend was attacked on campus. They didn't know that beneath her quiet exterior was a core of steel that had never been tested. As she sat between the oaks, working at the ropes binding her hands, Sarah Martinez began to plan. If they wanted to hunt her, she would give them a hunt they would never forget, but she wouldn't be the prey they expected. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, and with each passing minute, Sarah felt her fear transforming into something far more dangerous: determination. She would survive this nightmare, and she would make sure these monsters never hurt anyone else again. When sunset came, she would be ready. The rope around Sarah's wrists had finally loosened enough for her to work one hand free. Hours of careful manipulation, twisting and pulling while trying to appear resigned to her fate, had paid off. The coarse fibers had rubbed her skin raw, but she ignored the burning sensation. Pain was nothing compared to the alternative these men had planned for her. Tyler and Marcus sat about 20 feet away, sharing a bottle of whiskey and cleaning their rifles with the casual efficiency of experienced hunters. They occasionally glanced her way, but mostly they seemed confident that she posed no threat. That confidence would be their downfall. "So, how many others have there been?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. She needed to know what she was dealing with, needed to understand the full scope of their evil. Marcus looked up from his weapon, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "Others? What makes you think there have been others?" "The planning, the specific location. This isn't your first time." Tyler laughed, taking a long pull from the bottle. "Smart girl." "Yeah, there have been others. Not many who figured that out so quickly, though." "What happened to them?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "Depends," Marcus said, returning to his rifle maintenance. "Some made it interesting. Some didn't." The ones who didn't, he shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. Sarah's stomach churned, but she forced herself to keep talking. Every minute she could delay the hunt was another minute to prepare, another minute to think. "And my friends back at camp?" "Oh, they're fine," Tyler assured her, "sleeping like babies." Amazing what you can slip into someone's coffee when they're not paying attention. They'll wake up tomorrow with headaches and fuzzy memories. Probably assume everyone just wandered off or something. The casual way he discussed drugging her friends made Sarah's anger spike, but she kept her expression neutral. Let them think she was broken, terrified, resigned to her fate. The longer they underestimated her, the better her chances became. The sun was getting lower, painting the forest in shades of orange and deep red. Soon it would be dark, and the hunt would begin. Sarah had maybe an hour left to finalize her plans. She had spent the afternoon studying every detail of her surroundings while appearing to simply sit in defeated silence. The clearing between the oaks was roughly 40 feet long and 20 feet wide. Dense forest pressed in on 3 sides, while the fourth opened onto what looked like a game trail leading deeper into the wilderness. The trees themselves were ancient giants, their trunks easily 6 feet in diameter. Their branches started high overhead, well out of reach, but their massive root systems created natural hiding places and obstacles. Most importantly, Sarah had noticed something her captors had missed: a small gap between the roots of the eastern oak that led to what appeared to be an old animal den or natural cave. During one of Marcus's trips to relieve himself, Sarah had also spotted something else that made her heart race with possibility. About 50 feet past the oak trees, partially hidden by undergrowth, was what looked like an old hunter's blind, a wooden platform built in the crook of a large pine tree. If she could reach it, she would have the high ground and possibly even shelter. But first, she had to survive the initial moments of the hunt. "Time to go," Tyler announced, standing and shouldering his rifle. The sun had touched the horizon, painting everything in blood-red light. Marcus stood as well, checking the scope on his weapon. "Remember the rules, sweetheart. You get a 5-minute head start." After that, we come for you. Try to make it interesting. It's more fun for everyone that way." They cut the rope securing her to the space between the oaks but left her hands bound, though Sarah had already worked one completely free and the other was loose enough to slip out of at will. She rubbed her wrists, wincing at the raw skin, and slowly got to her feet. "Which way should I run?" she asked, playing her role as the terrified victim. "Your choice," Tyler said. "But choose wisely. Some paths lead deeper into the wilderness, where you might actually have a chance. Others," he smiled coldly. "Well, let's just say some paths are shorter than others." Sarah nodded, looking around as if trying to decide. In reality, she had already planned her route. First, she would head toward the game trail, making enough noise to ensure they could follow her tracks. But then she would double back, using techniques her oldest brother had taught her during their childhood games of hide-and-seek in the woods behind their house. 5 minutes, Marcus called out, checking his watch. "Starting now." Interruption. Interruption. Sarah took off running toward the game trail, crashing through the underbrush with deliberate clumsiness. She wanted them to hear her, wanted them to think she was panicking and making amateur mistakes. Behind her, she could hear their laughter and crude comments about how this might be over sooner than they had hoped. Once she was out of sight, Sarah slipped her hands free from the loosened ropes and began moving more carefully. The game trail was well worn and easy to follow in the fading light. She ran along it for about 200 yards, making sure to leave clear footprints and broken branches in her wake. Then she found what she was looking for. A rocky stream crossing where the water would hide her scent and footprints. Sarah waded into the cold water, gasping as it soaked through her hiking boots and socks. She followed the stream back toward the clearing, moving as quietly as possible through the shallow water. The rocky stream bed was treacherous in the dim light, and more than once she nearly fell on the slippery stones, but it was leading her exactly where she wanted to go, back to the area behind the oak trees, approaching from an angle her hunters wouldn't expect. "Time's up," she heard Tyler's voice echo through the forest, followed by the sound of crashing vegetation, as both men began pursuing her along the obvious trail she had left. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. She climbed out of the stream about 100 yards from the clearing and began making her way toward the hunter's blind she had spotted earlier. Moving through dense forest in near darkness was harder than she had anticipated, but her eyes were adjusting, and she forced herself to be patient. Rushing now would only lead to mistakes. Behind her, she could hear her pursuers moving along the game trail, their voices carrying through the still air as they commented on her trail and speculated about how far she might have gotten. They were being loud, confident, careless. That would work in her favor. The hunter's blind was even better than she had hoped. The wooden platform was about 15 feet off the ground, accessed by metal rungs nailed into the tree trunk. Better yet, someone had left supplies, a tarp, some rope, and what looked like an emergency survival kit. Sarah climbed quickly, pulling herself up onto the platform just as she heard voices getting closer. Tyler and Marcus had followed her trail to the stream crossing. "Clever girl," Marcus's voice drifted up from below, "trying to throw us off the scent." "Won't work, though," Tyler replied. "We'll just split up, cover both directions." She can't have gone far. From her elevated position, Sarah could see them clearly as they stood by the stream. Marcus had turned on a powerful flashlight, sweeping the beam back and forth across the water. Tyler was examining the banks, looking for signs of where she might have emerged. "You take upstream, I'll go downstream," Tyler decided. "Meet back here in an hour if neither of us finds anything." They separated, each man following the stream in opposite directions, with their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Sarah waited until their lights had disappeared before climbing down from the platform. Now came the dangerous part. She needed to get back to their camp and find Jake and Emma, but she also knew that Tyler and Marcus would eventually realize they were being played. When they did, they would be furious and infinitely more dangerous. The emergency kit from the hunter's blind had yielded several useful items: a compass, waterproof matches, a small knife, and a whistle. The knife wasn't much, just a simple folding blade, but it was better than nothing. The whistle could be crucial if she managed to get close enough to wake her friends. Sarah made her way back toward the original campsite, using the compass to navigate in the darkness. The forest was alive with sounds: rustling leaves, distant owl calls, the scurry of small animals through the underbrush. Every noise made her heart race, wondering if it was natural or if one of her hunters had circled back. It took her nearly an hour to reach the area where they had made camp. She approached carefully, staying in the tree line and watching for any signs of movement. The campsite appeared deserted, but she could make out the shapes of tents in the dim starlight. Emma and Jake were unconscious in their respective tents, breathing deeply but not responding when Sarah whispered their names. Whatever Tyler had given them was powerful, and she realized with growing despair that she wouldn't be able to wake them. The sound of approaching footsteps made her freeze. Someone was coming back to the camp. Moving confidently through the forest without trying to be quiet, Sarah pressed herself against the trunk of a large tree and held her breath. Tyler emerged from the tree line, his rifle slung over his shoulder and his flashlight beam dancing ahead of him. He looked frustrated and angry, probably having realized that he had been outsmarted. "Marcus!" he called out in a harsh whisper. "She's not by the stream. Little bitch is cleverer than we thought." There was no response. Tyler walked through the camp, checking the tents and confirming that Jake and Emma were still unconscious. Then he sat down on a log and pulled out his phone, though Sarah knew there was no signal up here. "Where are you, you clever little rabbit?" Tyler muttered to himself. "You can run, but you can't hide forever." Sarah realized this was her chance. Tyler was alone, distracted, and not expecting an attack. The small knife felt inadequate in her hand, but it was all she had. She began moving carefully through the shadows, trying to position herself behind him. A branch snapped under her foot, and Tyler's head whipped around. "There you are," he said, standing and raising his rifle. "I was wondering when you'd try to come back for your friends." Sarah dove behind a tree as Tyler fired. The gun shot thunderously loud in the quiet forest. The bullet splintered bark inches from her head, and she realized that the game had changed. He was no longer interested in playing with her. He wanted her dead. "That was for making me look like a fool," Tyler shouted, working the bolt on his rifle to chamber another round. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Let's see how smart you are with a bullet in your chest." Sarah ran, crashing through the forest with Tyler in pursuit. She could hear him behind her, his flashlight beam swinging wildly as he tried to keep her in sight while navigating the rough terrain. Another gunshot rang out, and this time the bullet was close enough that Sarah felt the wind of its passage. Tyler was a good shot even while running, and she knew she couldn't keep this up much longer. Then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Marcus's voice calling out from somewhere ahead of her. "I hear the shots. Where is she?" They were coordinating now, trying to box her in. Sarah realized she was running out of options and out of time. Soon they would have her trapped between them, and her clever escape plan would be worthless. But as she ran through the darkness, dodging trees and leaping over fallen logs, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Exhilaration. She was still alive. Still fighting. Still one step ahead of these monsters. They might kill her, but they would have to catch her first. The hunter's blind was too far away and too obvious now. The stream was equally compromised. But there was one place she hadn't considered. One hiding spot that might be crazy enough to work. Sarah changed direction, heading back toward the clearing where this nightmare had begun. Between those two massive oak trees lay the animal den she had spotted earlier. It was a tight space, probably uncomfortable, but it would hide her completely from their flashlights and guns. The clearing appeared ahead of her, bathed in pale moonlight. Sarah could see the gap between the oak roots that led to the den. It looked smaller than she remembered, but she was committed now. Behind her, Tyler's flashlight beam was getting closer, and she could hear Marcus answering his calls from the other side of the clearing. They would be here in minutes, and when they arrived, they would find nothing but an empty clearing and two confused hunters. Sarah squeezed through the gap between the roots, scraping her shoulders and back as she forced herself into the narrow space. The den was even smaller than she had thought, barely large enough for her to lie flat. But it was completely hidden from view. She pressed herself against the earth and tried to control her breathing as footsteps approached the clearing. "She came back here," Tyler's voice was right above her, so close she could have reached up and touched his boot. "I saw her heading this way." "Impossible," Marcus replied. "There's nowhere to hide here. We would see her." "Then where the hell is she?" Sarah closed her eyes and waited, her hand gripping the small knife. If they found her in here, she would be trapped with no way to run. But sometimes the best hiding place was right under your enemy's nose. The footsteps moved away as the two men searched the surrounding forest, their voices growing fainter. Sarah allowed herself to breathe again, but she knew this wasn't over. They would be back, and next time they might be more thorough in their search. As she lay in the cramped den, listening to her hunters prowl through the forest above, Sarah began planning her next move. The night was far from over, and she intended to survive until dawn. Sarah remained hidden in the cramped den for what felt like hours, listening to Tyler and Marcus search the area above her. Their voices grew increasingly frustrated as they failed to find any trace of their quarry. Several times one of them passed directly over her hiding spot, their heavy boots thudding on the earth just inches from her head. "This is impossible," Marcus snarled, his voice tight with rage. "She can't have just vanished into thin air." "Maybe she doubled back to the camp again," Tyler suggested, though he sounded doubtful. "Could be trying to wake up her friends." "No, she was here. I saw the tracks leading into this clearing. She's somewhere close, I can feel it." Sarah pressed herself deeper into the earth, hardly daring to breathe. The small knife felt slippery in her sweaty palm, but she maintained her grip on it. If they found her now, she would go down fighting. Eventually, their voices moved away as they expanded their search deeper into the forest. Sarah waited until she couldn't hear them at all before carefully emerging from her hiding place. Her whole body ached from being cramped in the small space, and her clothes were filthy with dirt and dead leaves. The moon had moved across the sky, telling her that several hours had passed. Dawn was still far off, but she had survived the most dangerous part of the night. Now she needed to figure out how to turn the tables on her hunters. Sarah made her way back to the hunter's blind, moving carefully through the forest, and stopping frequently to listen for any sounds of pursuit. The climb up to the platform was easier the second time, and she felt a sense of relief as she settled onto the wooden planks high above the ground. From this vantage point, she could see the flashlight beams of Tyler and Marcus as they continued their search in the distance. They had separated again, each covering different sections of the forest, but their movements seemed less coordinated now. Frustration and exhaustion were taking their toll. The emergency kit had one more item that Sarah hadn't fully considered before: a small flare gun with 2 flares. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it gave her an idea. If she could separate her hunters and catch one alone, she might be able to turn the tables. Sarah studied their patterns from her elevated position, noting how they moved and communicated. Tyler seemed to be the leader, making the decisions about where to search, while Marcus followed his suggestions. They stayed within shouting distance of each other, but that also meant they were vulnerable if something happened to one of them. She waited until Tyler moved toward the stream crossing, leaving Marcus to search the area closer to the original campsite. This was her chance. Climbing down from the platform, Sarah began making her way toward Marcus's position. She moved as quietly as possible, using every technique her brothers had taught her about moving through forests without being detected. The key was patience. Rushing led to broken branches and rustling leaves that would give away her position. Marcus was maybe 50 yards away, his flashlight beam sweeping methodically through the trees as he searched for signs of her passage. He was being thorough but predictable, following a grid pattern that made it easy for Sarah to anticipate his movements. She circled around to get ahead of him, then positioned herself behind a large fallen log that blocked his path. When Marcus approached the obstacle, he would have to either climb over it or go around, and either option would put him at a disadvantage. The wait seemed endless, but finally she could hear Marcus approaching through the forest, muttering angrily to himself about clever bitches and what he was going to do when he caught her. His flashlight beam danced ahead of him, and Sarah could see that he was carrying his rifle at the ready. Marcus reached the fallen log and paused, shining his light over it to judge the best way around. That moment of distraction was all Sarah needed. She rose from behind the log and fired the flare gun directly at him. The bright red flare struck him in the chest, not with enough force to seriously injure him, but hot enough to set his shirt smoldering and blind him temporarily. Marcus screamed, dropping his rifle and trying to beat out the burning fabric. Sarah was already moving, vaulting over the log and grabbing his fallen weapon. The rifle was heavier than she had expected, but she managed to get it pointed at him as he staggered backward, still trying to clear his vision. "Try that again and you're dead," Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Marcus stopped struggling with his burnt shirt and slowly raised his hands, though his eyes were still watering from the flare's brightness. "You little bitch," he gasped. "You don't know what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Sarah replied, checking to make sure the rifle's safety was off. "I'm surviving. Something you didn't expect me to do. Tyler will hear the scream. He'll come running, and when he gets here, you'll be outnumbered again." Sarah smiled grimly. "I'm counting on it." She had Marcus sit down with his back against a tree, then used the rope from the emergency kit to tie his hands behind him. The knots were tight and well positioned. Even if he managed to work free, it would take him considerable time.
"Here's what's going to happen," Sarah explained as she worked.
"Your friend Tyler is going to come looking for you. When he does, I'm going to be waiting for him. And then this nightmare you started is going to end." "You can't win," Marcus said. But there was less confidence in his voice now. "Even if you get Tyler, you'll never make it out of these woods alive. You're miles from anywhere, no cell service, No way to call for help. I'll worry about that after I deal with both of you, Sarah replied. The scream had indeed attracted Tyler's attention. Sarah could hear him crashing through the forest, calling Marcus's name. She positioned herself behind another tree, rifle ready, and waited. Tyler emerged into the small clearing where Marcus sat tied to the tree, his flashlight beam immediately finding his partner. Marcus! What the hell happened? It's a trap! Marcus shouted. She's got my rifle! Tyler spun around, trying to locate Sarah in the darkness, but she had the advantage of position and preparation. Looking for me? She called out from behind her tree. Tyler fired in the direction of her voice, but the shot went wide. Sarah could have returned fire immediately, but something held her back. Despite everything these men had put her through, she wasn't a killer. Not yet. It's over, Tyler, she said instead. Drop your weapon and sit down next to your friend. You're bluffing, Tyler replied, though he sounded uncertain. You don't have the guts to pull that trigger. Try me. For a long moment, the forest was silent, except for the sound of everyone's breathing. Tyler was weighing his options, probably calculating whether he could get another shot off before Sarah could react. You know what I think? Tyler said finally. I think you're too soft to kill anyone. You're probably not even pointing that rifle at me right now. He raised his own weapon, and Sarah realized she was out of time for hesitation. She squeezed the trigger, and the rifle kicked against her shoulder with tremendous force. The shot echoed through the forest, and Tyler cried out in pain, his rifle spinning away into the darkness. Sarah had aimed for his shoulder, not wanting to kill him but needing to stop the immediate threat. Tyler clutched his wounded arm and sank to his knees, cursing steadily. I warned you, Sarah said, keeping the rifle trained on him as she approached. Now sit down next to Marcus and don't move. With both men secured, Sarah finally had time to think about her next move. Dawn was still hours away, and she had to figure out how to get help. The nearest road was miles away, and she had no way to navigate in the darkness. But first, she needed to check on Jake and Emma. Whatever drug Tyler had given them, it had been hours since they'd consumed it. They might be starting to wake up. She left Tyler and Marcus tied in the forest, taking both rifles with her as she made her way back to the campsite. The familiar shapes of the tents were reassuring after the night's terrors. Emma was stirring when Sarah looked into her tent, groaning softly and holding her head. Sarah, what happened? I feel terrible. Em, listen to me, Sarah said urgently. Tyler drugged you, both of you. He and Marcus. They tried to hunt me through the forest. Emma sat up slowly, her eyes struggling to focus. What? That's crazy. Tyler's Emma's friend. He wouldn't... Look at me, Em. Look at my clothes, my face. Does this look like I've been sitting around the campfire all night? Emma's eyes widened as she took in Sarah's appearance. The torn clothing, the dirt, the scratches from branches and thorns.
Oh, my God.
Are you hurt? Are they? They're taken care of. But we need to get out of here. Can you wake Jake? Jake was harder to rouse, but eventually they managed to get him conscious and somewhat coherent. He listened in shocked silence as Sarah explained what had happened, his face growing paler with each detail. They were going to kill you, he whispered. They drugged us so we couldn't help. But they underestimated me, Sarah replied. And now they're the ones who are trapped. The three of them worked together to pack up the camp and load everything into Tyler's jeep. Sarah kept one of the rifles with her, not trusting that her captives would stay put indefinitely. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the forest in shades of gold and pink, Sarah led her friends to where she had left Tyler and Marcus. Both men were still tied to their respective trees, though Tyler had lost a considerable amount of blood from his shoulder wound. We need to get him to a hospital, Emma said, her natural compassion overriding her anger. We will, Sarah agreed. But first, we're going to drive to where there's cell service and call the police. These men are going to answer for what they've done. To me, and to whoever came before me. Tyler looked up at her with hatred burning in his eyes. You have no proof, he said through gritted teeth. It's your word against ours. Sarah smiled and pulled out her phone, pressing play on a voice recording app. Tyler's own words echoed back to him. Smart girl. Yeah, there have been others. Not many who figured that out so quickly, though. Amazing what people will confess when they think they're in complete control, Sarah said, stopping the recording. I've got everything you said to me, every threat, every admission. The police are going to be very interested in hearing this. The drive down from the mountains was surreal. Sarah sat in the passenger seat with the rifle across her lap, while Jake drove Tyler's jeep. In the back, Emma kept watch over their prisoners, who were secured with additional rope and looking decidedly less confident than they had the night before. When they finally reached cell service, Sarah called 911 and reported the incident. Within an hour, the area was swarming with police cars and emergency vehicles. Tyler was taken to a hospital under armed guard, while Marcus was arrested and read his rights. Detective Linda Rodriguez, a seasoned investigator with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, took Sarah's statement while EMTs checked her for injuries. "You did everything right," the detective told her. "Most people in your situation would have panicked, made it easy for them. You kept your head and turned the tables." "Are there really others?" Sarah asked. "Other victims?" Detective Rodriguez nodded grimly. "We've had reports over the years, missing hikers, unexplained disappearances. Nothing we could connect, but your recording changes everything. We'll be reopening several cold cases." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Tyler and Marcus's crimes. They had been hunting human prey for nearly 5 years, targeting isolated campers and hikers in remote areas. Some victims had never been found. Others had been discovered months or years later, their deaths attributed to animal attacks or accidents. Sarah's courage in fighting back and gathering evidence had finally brought their reign of terror to an end. The trial made national headlines. Sarah testified about her ordeal, her voice steady and clear as she recounted every detail of that terrible night. Tyler and Marcus were both convicted on multiple counts of attempted murder, assault, and conspiracy. Additional charges were filed as investigators connected them to other missing persons cases. Tyler received life in prison without possibility of parole. Marcus got the same sentence. During the sentencing hearing, Sarah stood before the judge and delivered her victim impact statement. "These men thought they could terrorize me, hunt me like an animal, and get away with it," she said. "They were wrong. I refused to be their victim. I fought back, I survived, and I made sure they would never hurt anyone else again." She paused, looking directly at Tyler and Marcus for the first time since the trial began. "You taught me something about myself that night. You taught me that I'm stronger than I ever knew. You thought you were hunting prey, but you found a fighter instead." The courtroom was silent as Sarah continued. "I hope you spend every day of your life sentences thinking about the woman who got away, the one who turned your own game against you, the one who made sure your hunting days were over forever." Sarah left the courthouse that day surrounded by friends and family, finally free from the nightmare that had begun between those 2 oak trees in the Montana wilderness. She had survived not just by running or hiding, but by refusing to let fear control her actions. In the years that followed, Sarah became an advocate for wilderness safety and women's self-defense. She spoke at colleges and community centers, teaching other women the skills and mindset that had saved her life. She never returned to those Montana mountains, but she never forgot the lessons they had taught her. The story of her survival spread far beyond the courtroom and news reports. It became a testament to the power of human resilience, of the strength that can emerge when people refuse to be victims. Sarah Martinez had gone into those woods as a college student worried about exams and boyfriends. She had emerged as a survivor who had faced the worst of human nature and emerged victorious. The 2 oak trees still stood in that remote clearing, silent witnesses to a night when evil had finally met its match, in one young woman's unbreakable will to live. And somewhere, in other dark places where predators lurked, the story of Sarah's fight served as a warning. Sometimes the prey fights back, and when it does, the hunters become the hunted.